Hello, and welcome to Lesson 8 on An Inspector Calls. And what we're going to talk about today is the character Eric Birling. I find Eric a very, very interesting character. We're going to talk about why is Eric important in the play? What does Eric represent in the play? Priestley uses him to show a myriad of different things. And what does Priestley try to demonstrate through Eric's character? Okay, so let's begin. Right, so Eric, we know he's quite young. In the beginning of the play, the opening scene, when they're celebrating Sheila's engagement, he is presented as quite immature. He's obviously had a bit too much to drink. So that is showing him as a very young, privileged, immature young man. Now, he is obviously a part of the new generation. Priestley uses the old generation versus new generation quite well in Inspector Calls. It is this new thoughts and ideas emerging against the old. Now, he's a part of a younger generation, like his sister Sheila. They are both presented like little children in some ways in the very beginning of the play. They're constantly bickering with each other like young little 7 and 8 year olds. But by the end of the play, they both evolve. They both accept their role in the death of Eva Smith, even though they might have the role that Sheila played might have been relatively minor. They still accept their responsibility. Whereas the older generation, Mr. and Mrs. Birling, and as well as Gerald, do not accept their responsibility. They don't see that they've done anything wrong. Right. So his parents are part of this old generation and they refuse to accept the responsibility for their role in Eva's death. They see their actions as completely acceptable. Now, this refusal to accept any responsibility or any sort of change is sort of symbolic. Eric questions his father about the war. What about a war? Now, remember, this is set in 1912. The play was written much later. It was written in 1944, I believe, performed for the first time in 1945. So we're right at the tail end of World War II. So, but anyway, he questions him. He says, oh, what about this war, this impending war that's coming? And his father's denying that it's ever going to happen. It's not going to happen. It is an attitude of denial. They're denying this war, which is nobody wants to, go through a war, but also the change that that does bring about. So he makes several remarks about responsibility throughout the play that we will discuss. Now, the context of this denial of the war. The war is in a way symbolic of change. World War I was horrific, but it did bring about some social change. Again, as I said before, and we've talked about this in previous lessons on Inspector Calls. Priestley wrote Inspector Calls in 1944. And it was performed to audiences as early as 1945, but the story is set in 1912. The audience knows what happens in history because it's much later. They know about the horrors of World War I. They know what else happens, the Great Depression and other events in history that have come about as a result of this elder generation refusing to accept the responsibility for their actions and change. Now, the audience would also know about about the rigid class structure that existed prior to World War I. Everybody knew their place. Everybody had a place in society. We talked about how it was very top heavy. The vast majority of wealth was held within about 5% of the population. And Priestley was against this. So the audience would know about that. And they would also know that with World War I, that started to bring an end to that rigid class structure. So this denial that this war is going to happen is in a way the Birlings denying that this change is going to come. They wouldn't want this change to come. Why would they? They're very privileged people. All right, so Eric himself, Priestley actually describes him as quite a conflicted character. In the stage direction, Priestley uses the word half very much. Eric is half shy. Eric is half assertive. Eric is not settled. He's full of this inner conflict. He's a young man. hasn't had much life experience yet, but he's going to soon realize that his actions have consequences. All right. Before he realizes what's happened with Eva and his role in Eva's death, he does make several attempts to stand up to his father. Now, he does speak up for Eva when Mr. Birling tells the story of Eva, believes she's got a different name at this point, but about the woman, he doesn't realize that they're the same person, asking for more wages. He does stick up and say, well, why should they not want more wages? That's only fair. Why shouldn't they want more? We try to get the best for ourselves. Why shouldn't they? So that is a new attitude. And he actually presents very, very well-reasoned arguments for this. I believe he talks about how, well, don't you try to get the very best prices and the very best business deals? So they're trying to get the best. They're just trying to do the same. They're just trying to get more for themselves. So why should she be sacked for that? His father just does not accept that line of thought, shouts at him, tells him to button it. Okay, now also, Priestley could also be using Eric as a further extension of his socialistic views. Priestley was a socialist, as we've talked about in previous lessons. He was against this class structure, too much wealth being held at the top, not enough for everybody else. So Eric takes different views to workers wanting more wages. That's who his father. Challenges his father with the business argument, trying to get prices, and he just has a more compassionate heart in this way than his father does. Now, this shows to be rather ironic. So, again, now, Eric is of a very privileged class, but he's different from the other privileged men in the room. We have Eric, we have Gerald, and we have Mr. Birling. We also have the inspector, but he's different. Gerald is the fiance of Sheila. He is presented in the beginning as sort of like every mother's dream catch for their daughter. Very handsome, very wealthy, very successful, ticks all the boxes. But we learn later that Gerald is not everything that he seems. Now you contrast him with Eric, who is very young, younger than Gerald, very handsome, but quite irresponsible, quite silly. And, in the beginning, he's presented as quite immature. And then you contrast him with Mr. Birling, who's just much older, much more not a compassionate man, very business oriented, cares about money, cares about his business, cares about his knighthood more than anything else. But Eric's education is the same, pretty much the same as Gerald's. He had public schools, university, and in this way, he is similar to Gerald. Gerald had this as well. However, when it comes to the situation with Eva, and when the family are told that this poor girl has died, this could be another dig at the privileged classes that Priestley makes. Eric has the same educational opportunities as the other two men. Eric evolves in the story. Again, he accepts responsibility for his actions. He's very remorseful for what's happened. He actually takes the risk and steals money from his father's company to give to Eva to help her. It doesn't do much, but he does take that risk. Now, this shows that despite his great education and despite his advantages in life, his real learning comes from his experience with this young woman and what has happened. That is what wakes him up, and he realizes he needs to change. Okay, so Gerald doesn't change much, even when Sheila breaks up with him, breaks the engagement, says, not now, I'm not ready for this now. Doesn't really faze him that much. When the inspector is questioning Mr. Birling and, stating his role in Eva's death, he's like, no, it's just business. Eric really changes. The other two don't. So Gerald and the elder Birlings do not change despite their education and position in society, but Eric, through his life experience, does. So in a way, Priestley's saying titles, education, wealth, is really not what matters. It's what you learn in life. Right. And then, now by the end of the play, now Eric has evolved quite a lot. He's no longer described as half of anything, half assertive or half shy. He's fully assertive. He stands up to his father and even criticizes him for only caring about his knighthood and his business. And he's like, we all killed this girl. We all have to take responsibility. And he's furious when they refuse to do so. And he lashes out at his mother, stating that, even though had she had known possibly that Eva was carrying her grandchild, she might have behaved differently. But he's telling her, it doesn't matter. You have to treat a stranger with the same compassion as you would a family member, because you just don't know. You just don't know. So he's lashing out at his parents, standing up to his parents. He's taking more care and responsibility than they are, but he isn't completely off the hook. He is, he has led privileged lifestyle. He has behaved like a bit of a, privileged lad. And Priestley is also showing this is the outcome of that sort of irresponsible behavior. Eva becoming pregnant, losing her job, is a result of his drinking and behaving like an immature child. So he's not, even though Eric is remorseful and accepts responsibility, he is also using Eric as a way to say, look, this is what privilege and irresponsibility combined can create a very, very sad and terrible situation. Okay. So that is Eric. Like I said, I find him one of the more interesting characters in the play, even though he starts off as a very privileged, spoiled schoolboy, but by the end, he has really assumed the role of a man, a gentleman, and will probably, if he does take over his father's business, be a completely different type of boss, caring more for his workers than the actual profits. Anyway, I hope everybody has enjoyed this session on Inspector Calls. I hope they are helpful. Please, 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 please do subscribe to my channel. I will keep the videos coming. Please, please, please comment. Please ask me your questions, leave me your comments. I really do enjoy reading them, even if you want to criticize it and tell me, oh, you'd be better if you did this. I don't mind. It helps me. Anyway, everybody, I thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again in my future tutorials, and best of luck in your studies.